Well, good evening. Welcome to the gorgeous Stainforth Keadby Canal, not too far from Thorn near Doncaster. One of my favourite bits of water to fish in the winter. Why? Because it's full of great big roach like that. I mean, that's probably a 4-ounce one. I've had quite a few bigger than that today. But it's just a stunning venue that's absolutely packed with fish. And I'm not going to lie, folks, I've had a bit of a disastrous start to this afternoon's filming because, first of all, the motorway was shut. So it took us ages to get here. We had to go the long way around. It's normally only about 40 minutes from my house to here, but it took us closer to an hour and a half, 2 hours today. And then we got here and they decided to cut all the grass just as we arrived. And on clear canals in winter or autumn as we're in now, a lot of disturbance on the bank, to be honest, is the last thing you want. But I mean, things like that, you just have to swallow them because obviously it's the same all the way along. But I did expect it to take a little while to start catching. But the sport's still been absolutely excellent, to be honest. All I'm doing, I'm fishing about 11 metres out. That's like the bottom of the canal, really, the bottom of the near slopes, probably 6 metres, and it starts shelving up again about just past 13 metres, so it's pretty much on the flat bottom of the canal. Often I'll fish multiple lines. If it was a match situation, I'd definitely have lines longer, and I have actually got a line today shorter as well, but this has been the best one. And all I've been doing is loose feeding some Fuka Micro 2-in-1s over a little bit of ground bait that I put in at the start of the session. I've not actually topped up with ground bait. All I've done is 3 balls in at the start, then fished over the top of it. Now, as I said, I've also fished a shorter line today, just over the near side weed. That can be a brilliant line on canals, that can. Bottom of the far slope, it's no matter whether it's a narrow canal, it might only be 2 or 3 metres out on a narrow canal, or a deeper canal like this. That near slope is a really good line. But I'll be honest, I think with the disturbance today of that grass cutter coming down, this longer line's definitely been better. I've had more bites out here. So I think a really important thing to consider on venues like this, clear venues, is disturbance. And that works in 2 ways. As I've said, you really don't want a lot. Oh, that's a little bite. Oh, that's another roach. You really don't want a lot happening on the bank around you. So if you've got people walking about, tell them to keep the distance. I've had to be very firm with our cameraman today. I think I've upset him actually. He's even bought me some jam tarts, look. But he hasn't. I'm just know how important it is to keep the area around you free of spectators, especially when the water's clear. That's a little pommy there called. They're a lovely little fish. There's loads of them in this canal this time of year. And the other thing which has affected quite a few of the anglers fishing today is pike. Now, there's a chap fishing about 100 yards down from me today, and he's had a nightmare. He's had, I think he said, a dozen pike on or something like that today. And what happens when you pleasure fish on venues like this? I mean, it's bad enough in match conditions, but at least then they sort of spread out along the anglers. But when you pleasure fish, I think because you're the only one making disturbance, it can be the case that pike really home in on you. 2 things to bear in mind with that. The first one is don't mess about when you're getting your fish in. Ship them in, swing them in, and that's it. Don't hang about. I've got a 6 elastic on here. I'd quite like to fish with a finer elastic, to be honest. If there were no pike, I'd be using a 4 elastic maybe, or even a 5. But because I know there is the odd pike here, I've got a heavier elastic on, because as you can see, I can come straight back like that, and I'm lifting all the time and the fish is coming in. We're not messing about, letting it flap around in the water, because that's when the pike strike. I've had a big pike, I've got my keep net, believe it or not, earlier, and I think it got its teeth caught in the mesh because it was flashing around, and the net was shaking everywhere. But I went to prod it with a net, and I think it freed itself. So I'm going to ship out. I'm going to try and catch you one more, and then I'm going to show you my rigs, what I'm doing, etc. today. And after I've done that, I'll talk you through what you can expect if you're heading out on the bank this weekend. First, let's catch one more fish. Just laying the rig into the side. Got a little marker on the far bank, which is a couple of chimney pots on that boat we've got opposite, and then I'm just feeding 15 or so micros in the catapult. I bought some hemp as well today. I was feeding that earlier. Honestly, I expected loose feeding hemp and fishing a single black micro to be best, but for whatever reason today, it's not been as good as loose feeding micros. Whether it's just the fish want me to match the hatch, i.e. I'm fishing micros so feeding them's better, that could be it. But the hemp was nowhere near as good to loose feed as the micros have been. I know for a fact from fishing at March with my old mate Alex Bates last year, which was it's a much shallower venue, a bit more flow than this. And to be honest, there's probably more fish than here. One thing we learnt on there is these little pommies. I don't know whether this is another pommy now. I've got it's come off actually. I bounced that one off. Well, that was another pommy, but they absolutely love Fuca. So could well be that because there's a few of them there as well, there's greater competition for the Fuca bait. I'm not sure, but to be honest, I'm not complaining. It's a lovely, cheap way of going fishing. I'll show you exactly what I'm doing colour-wise in a minute. That one didn't count because it dropped off. Got to have one in the mouth that counts. So, laying the rig in line with the marker, letting the float drop through, picking the catapult up, 10 or 15 micros in the pouch, firing around the float. Oh, that didn't take long. Missed a bite there straight away. I think sometimes, I'm not making excuses, honest, but when you're distracted, when you're sort of trying to multitask, when you're roach fishing, like when you're talking and trying to fish, that's when you lose the odd fish, miss the odd bite because you're not 100% on it. You do really need to concentrate. And the key is, as always, getting your hook bait to fall through the last bit of water naturally with your loose feed. We've got a strung rig set up today on a bulk, but I'm using the bulk rig, that seems better. And that was a lovely bite, lovely clean bite. So as you see, we're not messing about, we're getting the fish in. It's a nice sized roach again, that. Can't knock them, can you? Awesome fishing. So what I'll do, I'll drop this chunky little chap and I can get the hook out. Come out. I'll drop this chunky little chap in the keep net. If you come down here, I'll show you my rigs and how I'm feeding. Right, rig wise, it's dead simple. I've just set up 2 today because we're only here for a short session, and as I said, I've kept things dead simple. So, first and foremost, the rig I've caught most of my fish on is this one. Now, these are probably my favourite natural venue float pattern. I just find myself using them more and more. They're made by DT Float. They're called a Nevis or a Nuddy. Look on his website, you'll see them. It's a lovely cane bristle, teardrop shaped body, carbon stem, and I've got my usual back shot just about 4 inches above the bristle, and that just lets me hold that float beautifully. There's quite a lot of skim on the canal today. It's not exactly windy, but every now and then it'll pull up one way, the surface tension, then the other, so that just helps you keep that float dead still and present your bait nicely. 6 elastic, it's a little crow's foot there. We're going down to a nice little bulk. It's a 1 gram float, that, so I've got a 0.6 Olivet plus a few other shot around it. I always like to put a little stringer shot below the Olivet because what that does is it actually kicks out the line below the Olivet away from the rest of the rig, so it stops you getting tangled. Dennis White put me onto that a few years ago, and it's a brilliant little tip. And then we've just got 3 number 10 droppers and a 6-inch hook length of 09 fluorocarbon with a size 20 Camazan B560 hook. So that's my one rig. The other rig is for if things are a little bit more tricky, or I explained I was half expecting to catch loose feeding hemp and fishing a piece of black on the hook, but it's just not happened. So this was the rig really set up for that, and it's another all-time favourite float of mine, the Preston Chianti. We've got strung out number 11 shot, that just going down the line there. It's around about 15 or 16 number 11s, going down to an 8-inch hook length, and again, a size 20 Camazan B560 to 09. All my rigs are tied on 011 reflow power line for this sort of natural venue fishing, and as we move into winter and it gets harder still, I'll probably drop down even to 010. So I kicked off with 3 small balls of ground bait. That's Census Lake and Dynamite Frenzy Dent Black mixed 50-50. It's a lovely mix that I've caught loads of fish on. And I just think a few particles in the peg, a little bit of attraction, some finer bait in there just helps to bring fish in and get them competing earlier on in the session. But then really the best way to catch today has definitely been to loose feed some bait. I've just been loose feeding the micros, but I'm just going to show you what I do because I think this is a good little tip. I actually have two tubs on my side tray. This is what I've been fishing with for the last couple of hours. And what I do, I pour a few fresh micros in here to this tub, use them for the hook, and then once I've caught a few fish and they're starting to dry out, maybe after every half an hour, I chuck them into that tub and I pour myself some fresh micros into this one. This tub is used for feeding with the slightly drier micros in it, and this tub obviously has my fresh ones in that I'm using on the hook, and that just means that you've always got a nice soft micro to put on the hook and you're ready to go out and catch a fish. Because if the micros get a little bit hard, like any sort of, I don't know, bread type bait that might dry out, you will find they'll come off the hook a bit more easily, and you might even find, because you have to really squeeze them on, you miss the odd bite as well because the hook doesn't pull through as natural. So I suppose that's the top tip from this. Keep your fuka fresh, and then once it's starting to go a little bit hard, it's good for the feed. So, how are your favourite waters going to fish this weekend? Well, to be honest, it depends very much on where you're heading. The forecast looks fairly settled for Saturday. We're looking fine weather. Sunday, we've got a band of rain moving across from the west. So I think everybody's going to get some at some point on Sunday from what I can see. But depending on where you are, depends on how early you're going to get it. Earlier in the west, not so bad in the east. Temperature-wise, which is perhaps the biggest thing that we keep an eye on to see how venues are going to fish, the good news is it's fairly settled. So if you're heading on your local commercial this weekend, I think you can expect to catch plenty of fish, and likewise, rivers and canals should be fairly good too. So, how's it looking in terms of degrees Celsius? Well, we're talking around about 13 to 17 degrees depending on where you are in the country. 13 in the north to about 17 in the south. And that's both days. It seems fairly consistent, dropping down to between 9 and 11 degrees at night. So again, not too cold. Because we have got the slightly shorter days and longer nights, the water is cooling down though, folks. So I'd certainly urge caution if you're going commercial fishing this weekend. As I said last time, it could well be venues fish the absolute heart out because that time is coming, you know. A lot of places fish like to stock up before winter, but at the same time, I honestly think you've got to err on the side of caution. I'd definitely be looking to start not feeding too much bait, just tapping a few micros or 4 mils in, and then feel your way in from there. I think a really good piece of advice this time of year is to start out towards the middle of the lake as well. What tends to happen in cooler weather is the fish will be out, you know, towards the middle of the lake and then move in closer and to the margins later. So depending on whether your local venue fishes like that, a lot do. I think starting out towards the middle of the lake and working your way in is a really good general piece of advice this time of year. Rivers, well, I think river fishing will be fantastic, to be honest. I think, you know, we've still got fairly settled temperatures, no frost yet, and the fish will probably be fairly well sort of spread out round and about. Another lovely pommy. Aren't they great fish to catch? The fish will still be quite spread out. I saw the results from the Y Winter League last week. It fished absolutely brilliantly. Big weights of dace, big weights of roach, and a massive 70 odd pound of bleak for Hadrian Whittle, which shows just how many fish are in that river at the minute. It's fantastic. So, whatever species you're after on the river and wherever you're heading, I think you'll probably have a fair chance of catching a few fish. We're not at the stage yet where the fish are really pushing into their usual winter haunts, the urban areas. That'll probably happen after we get a few frosts in a few weeks' time. So Fish still fairly well spread out right through the different waterways up and down the UK. And likewise on canals. Obviously today we're here on the Stainforth and Keadby at Thorn. As you can see, there's plenty of fish here, plenty of fish feeding, but it's not in full winter mode yet. If you give this another, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks, it'll be absolutely stuffed with roach as they move in from out of town to this area. There's a lot of fish here at the minute, don't get me wrong, but we're not at that winter level yet. I think there's fish all the way through the system. As we drove in, I could see, looking out into some of the countrified areas where the fish come from in the coolest of conditions, and there's still fish out there. I could see them topping. So, you know, we're not in winter yet. So there you have it, folks. Wherever you're going, I think it's going to be a great weekend to be on the bank, especially Saturday with that bit of sunshine. But the fishing on Sunday will be pretty good as well. It's just you're going to need your raincoat. Have a great weekend, folks. I'll see you on the bank next week.